You've heard it 1,000 times. A single fire, a single night of chaos, and the greatest library in the ancient world was lost forever, plunging humanity into a dark age. It's a tragic, perfect story. But what if I told you that story is almost entirely fiction? What if the real tragedy wasn't a dramatic blaze, but something far more mundane and far more devastating? The popular image is burned into our cultural memory. Julius Caesar, the siege of Alexandria, flames consuming thousands of scrolls, smoke rising from the ancient world's greatest repository of knowledge. The moment we lost everything, it feels right, doesn't it? It explains the mystery so neatly. A single catastrophe, a single villain, a single explanation. But here's the context you've never heard. Scholar Roger Bagnall puts it bluntly. We actually know very little about the library's fate. The sources we rely on are fragmented, contradictory, and written centuries after the events they describe. Ancient writers themselves can't agree on what happened. Plutarch, writing a century after Caesar's fire, claims the entire library was destroyed, but his Greek word for library, bibliotheke, could mean different things. And even if Caesar's fire damaged the collection, there is evidence for ongoing library activity in Roman Alexandria after his death. After Caesar was dead, so clearly a library still existed. That's not a single fire. That's a contradiction. So if not one big fire, then what? Let's talk about what really killed the Library of Alexandria. Blade 1. The administrative decay of the library wasn't a museum, it was a political project. The Ptolemaic kings poured money into it because it made Alexandria the intellectual capital of the world. They acquired books by confiscating them from ships that docked at the port, keeping the originals and returning copies to their owners. But in 145 BCE, Ptolemy VIII got into a power struggle with his brother. He won, and his punishment, he expelled all foreign scholars from the city. The head librarian fled to Cyprus and died shortly after. From that moment, the position of head librarian stopped going to eminent scholars. It went to political cronies. That's not a gap. That's a chasm. The budget for copying manuscripts, for maintenance, for the day-to-day work of preserving knowledge. It died long before any building did. When royal patronage stopped, the collection began to decay. Papyrus scrolls don't last forever. They need to be copied, maintained, stored properly. Without funding, without institutional support, they crumble. Religious and political upheaval made things worse. After Christianity rose in the city, the inclusive scholarship the library represented became increasingly unwelcome. The Serapeum, the daughter library, was destroyed in 391 CE when Christian rulers clamped down on pagan temples. But even then, there's no evidence the main library's collection was still there. It had likely already been destroyed decades earlier. By the time Arab forces conquered Alexandria in 641 CE, there is no evidence that any of the library's books, or even the buildings that housed them, still existed. This is exactly why I do this. We love the Hollywood version of history, the big fires, the heroic battles, the dramatic villainy, because it's easy. But the real story, it's usually about boring, bureaucratic choices that have massive consequences. Funding cuts, political infighting, generations of not caring enough to protect what matters. If you like flipping your perspective on history like this, hit that subscribe button. Here's the myth bust that actually matters. The Islamic destruction story, the one where Caliph Umar orders the library's books burned because they contradict the Quran, is complete fiction. It doesn't appear in any historical record until the 13th century, 600 years after the event it describes. Scholars have dismissed it as a fabrication since the 18th century. It was likely created to support a political agenda during the Crusades and later used to perpetuate a false narrative of Islamic anti-intellectualism. But here's what makes this so insidious. The myth gives us a single culprit. The truth gives us a tragedy of apathy. We don't lose history because of grand villains. We lose it because we stop caring enough to protect it. The real tragedy isn't the fire. It's the generations of neglect, the political infighting, the crumbling papyrus, the scholars packing up and leaving because nobody valued them anymore. By 272 CE, when the Emperor Aurelian leveled much of Alexandria in a war, it's likely the original library was already gone. The city's royal quarter, including the site of the library, was eventually submerged by an earthquake and tsunami and is now underwater. So what's the real lesson? We love the dramatic story because it absolves us. One fire, one villain, one moment of destruction. It's a tragedy, but it's someone else's fault. But the truth is harder. The truth says that great institutions don't usually die in spectacular flames. They die in quiet, bureaucratic neglect. They die when the funding dries up. They die when we stop copying the manuscripts. They die when we stop caring. Think about that for a second. What are we not caring enough to protect today? Remember the real version, not the Hollywood one. If history like this is what you're here for, subscribe. Because every week, we pull apart the version of the past you were sold and show you what was actually underneath. Drop a comment below. If you could save one scroll from a library before it faded away, which one would it be? I want to hear your thoughts.